Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of The Moving Screen. I'm Brendan Quinn with The Athletic. I'm here with Dylan Burkhart of umhoops.com. We are live in Chicago.
Chicago is an absolute disaster zone.
Chicago is a breathing cemetery of pre-St. Patrick's Day. Man, they do it. They don't mess around. They do not mess around. And folks, this is a very special edition of the podcast. As if we hadn't had enough Super Bowls. So let's count. The Michigan and Michigan State have met, I think, 3 times. As top 10 teams.
As right? Top 10 teams.
And all 3 have come. This will be the 3rd time, right?
This will be the 3rd. Is that right?
Yes. And all 3 have come within the existence of the Moving Screen podcast.
Best thing to ever happen to the rivalry, Moving Screen pod.
I felt like when John Beilein, after today's game, said, Michigan State is a force in the Big Ten and it's not going anywhere. And Michigan is a force in the Big Ten that's not going anywhere.
You know what else isn't going anywhere?
You're goddamn right I do. All right. Well, folk, I can't believe that this has happened. Big Ten championship game, Michigan State. St. Patrick's Day, on Selection Sunday, in Chicago. This is
it.
Take a back seat, Super Bowl, because it doesn't get any bigger than this.
This is our Super Bowl.
Well, until 3 weeks in Minneapolis.
Oh. Here we go again. It's not impossible.
Dylan, what are you sipping on there?
I am sipping on the Tighthead Brewing Company Erie IPA.
Okay.
Pretty good. What are you working with?
I've got a Flywheel Pilsner from Metropolitan Brewing. It's a local Chicago beer. I'm getting a little fat in the ass, I think is what you would say, and I think I needed to take a little break from porters and stouts.
You think just chugging Pilsners is going to make you better off? I don't know.
Maybe a slight difference.
Okay. Until
the whiskeys come out, but we couldn't have a whiskey fueled podcast. That would just probably go a little bit off the rails.
Yeah.
As if this has any chance of staying on it. But okay. Do we recap today's games, or
we can talk about the tournament up till now.
Okay.
What kind of stands out to me is we thought Michigan and Michigan State were the best teams in the Big Ten all year, and they pretty much coasted to this point, right? I mean, barely really broke a sweat. Both games are not all that close. The Ohio State game was a little closer, but it wasn't as close as the final score.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, we got all cute when we were filling out our brackets. Shout out to getting 2 picks right. That was a great move for the pod.
I'm really proud to wear that honor, but go ahead.
We thought about everything, all these other scenarios, and all these other teams that were pretty good.
Yeah.
But the Big Ten was really a lot of pretty good teams and 2 teams that were kind of head and shoulders above the rest, at least at their best.
Pause. Because we said that we were going to start this podcast by actually asking people that are listening to subscribe to umhoops.com, to subscribe to The Athletic. If you like the pod is free for a reason. We don't advertise and all that crap on the thing. There's no Dollar Shave Clubs and Stamps.coms and all that.
Although if they want to sponsor the pod,
we'll
they
take
can
a
call
sponsor.
us up.
That's fine. But mainly we do this for our readers. Dylan on UM Hoops, myself on The Athletic. So if you're down with the pod, subscribe to the sites, and we appreciate everyone. There's a number of people have come up in Chicago saying,
Mr. Quinn.
That was interesting, but either commenting on my gray hair or the podcast. So shout out to my man who stopped by today. But yes, that's the best way to support the podcast. But now back to the broadcast here. I agree with you, and also gotta love Chicago. Jesus Christ, you got to think about Wisconsin, the 4 seed, right? Purdue, the 3 seed, that are would it be considered kind of
2 seed?
2 seed, sorry, as kind of in the neighborhood of Michigan and Michigan State when you're talking about being the best teams in the league? Clearly from what you saw, Michigan State were just in a class all of their own.
Yeah, this Minnesota team, even if they didn't, that game was close. I mean, even if they would have lost, like Purdue would have won, that was a close game all along.
Right.
And Michigan it looked like they didn't belong in the same building.
Totally. The St. Patrick's Day in Chicago. Good Lord. Man. What do you think about that shot by Carson Edwards, though?
It's close.
It's close. Fair. Okay. So you want to talk about the tournament up until now. I think Michigan has played probably a little bit better overall than Michigan State.
I think that's fair.
Especially today.
I mean, Michigan today played about as close to a perfect game as you can play. It's just hard to say what that's worth because Minnesota just gave nothing. And I think I wouldn't buy any stock in Minnesota making a run in March, and this team is pretty limited. They're down on depth, so it's hard to play a perfect game against anyone. So like that counts for something, but how much they didn't play? Michigan didn't play a team as good as Wisconsin.
I mean, both of them made these teams look like dog shit. Like, okay, so Minnesota 0.831 points per possession. Wisconsin 0.846 points per possession. So either both of these defenses are like the elite of the elite, which statistically they are.
They are.
Right? But I also think that like both of their opponents just aren't that great. These are teams that some mid-major somewhere is praying for next Thursday or Friday.
Michigan didn't score for the final 4 minutes of the game when they emptied the bench. And they still ended up with 1.25 points per possession, which was their second highest all year.
Right.
So it's clearly a team that is clicking, but it's also kind of the perfect, I guess, like sort of way to get started with clicking is to play against Iowa and Minnesota on back-to-back days.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Well said.
But I think really what we have to talk about is
the game
tomorrow.
The game. Do you think that last time, I think for both of the first two games, we were just locked in, the game's decided by Cassius Winston versus Xavier Simpson? Does that apply for this game as well?
Yes.
I think it's more of a legit question, though, than the previous two.
I think what you look at is it's still their impact. Mm-hmm. Like, Michigan's defense needs to be better, and it's not necessarily that Cassius Winston will score all the points, but their backside on the pick and roll needs to be more connected, and they can't give up all those breakdowns that lead to easy points. And that's not always Winston, but it's still Winston dominating the game. Yeah. And it's not necessarily Simpson stopping that action. It's the other defenders on the court. But I still think whoever has the better game, the ball, like they're the two probably most important players in the Big Ten to what their teams do.
Totally.
And you saw it today. I mean, Simpson just dominated the game, and he controls everything. He's up to 20 assists, 1 turnover. I think he's 5 of 6 from 3 in the Big Ten tournament. Mm-hmm. He's been almost perfect. And truth be told, he was awful in East Lansing. Probably the worst game he's played all year. He completely, I think, psyched himself out with this whole Xavier Simpson, Cassius Winston thing, and was trying to do all this. I mean, to do that fake timeout thing he did
twice. Yeah.
That's not him. He's never been that way. That's not like that's just really, to me, kind of shows that he was maybe in his bag a little too much and was not really locked in to the degree he needed to. And the fact that he came out and played this well in Chicago says that maybe he realized that after the fact.
I totally agree. And on the flip side of it, like Cassius Winston at the highest level for those two games, just locked in, and he's just so within himself right now of just knowing kind of when to kick it into a different gear and when to engage with Izzo and when to kind of do his own thing. Like it's fascinating to watch that the dynamic between the two of them right now, because Izzo trusts Cassius certainly more so than ever before, and he knows he has to, and he has more rope, I think, than like pretty much anyone since I've been covering the program. It's only been a couple years, but like Tom lets him go a little bit when there will just be maybe a little wave off to what he says or whatever it is. You got to experience Izzo behind the bench.
Like we had prime seats to see Izzo in full throat today.
He got that athletic bump.
Yeah, he was. I'm curious how you're going to deal with covering a Michigan State game not in one of the locker rooms. You're not going to know what to do with yourself. You're going to be running off the floor at halftime. Like, let's go.
Going with the officials.
Yeah, the official in bed. Can finally unearth what everyone wants to know.
Oh, I can't wait for our officials breakdown by the end of the show. By the way, that is. Make sure you listen through to the end of the pod as we try to predict tomorrow's crew.
I mean, I think we can probably get it. It's easier now because they have to be here, right? They're not going to.
I've seen a variety of folks. We're not getting there yet.
All right. So where we're at is Simpson played a terrible game.
Yes.
Winston has played basically 2 perfect games.
Yeah.
Close to it.
Yeah.
Near perfect. What changes with
Charles Matthews
and Nick Ward?
Yes.
That's like a big change from
totally
8 days ago when they played before.
So now with Matthews, Michigan's options on switching screens is completely different. I think you can put Matthews on Kenny and switch 1-4.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's what they're going to do. For some reason, Luke Yaklich hasn't called me and told me his strategy yet, but that would be something I think that would be a really viable option. You might not do that for 40 minutes, but at certain moments when you really need to, you can go to that.
And at points in the game in East Lansing, they did switch to 1-4 screens with Brustakis or Livers or whoever it was. The biggest thing Charles Matthews gives you is that
he can do everything
defensively. If someone gets into foul trouble, you're not going to Brandon Johns.
Right.
And it's just, I think you really saw this week here how much he just solidifies everything that they want to do, right? Isaiah Livers, a little more aggressive after actually playing the 3 for extended time, but he can still play the 5 now because he doesn't have to play the 3. Yeah. He can still play the 4. He can really play that role and embrace it, and you the rotation really just sort of clicked this week. And I think some of that comes from playing without Matthews and then bringing him back in, and you sort of bring in that balance, I would say. So I think Michigan's rotation looked as natural as I can really remember it this week, and Isaiah Livers looked like a different player today. Obviously, he was just making a bunch of shots, but I think Matthews, it's not even about the offense, it's all just the defense.
Totally.
And they're a different team when he's on the court, and they have a different sense of confidence, kind of connectedness on defense that is very apparent, especially when you're sitting courtside and watching how they communicate and interact. And
I mean, he and Xavier Simpson are like they are running the show. Like they communicate everything from the sidelines to each other to everything. They call out everything. Like those two are like quasi middle linebackers almost.
Yeah, it's like Simpson's the middle linebacker and Matthews is the free
safety. Yeah,
right. He's controlling the secondary and Simpson is controlling everything kind of at the point of attack.
Right.
And that backside is what has just gone completely sideways in both Michigan State games.
So the flip side of this conversation is going to be now with Ward getting run again, obviously, and back in the lineup, and he's had some good moments in I'd say the first 2 games. I thought his wind looks pretty good to me. He's gotten up and down. There's been a couple moments where the hand was an issue. He had one ball stripped from him that he clearly probably just didn't have a good enough grip on. He tried to catch a ball one-handed on what would have been just a clean post touch for normal Nick Ward, and he fumbled it away. but he's kind of giving them, I think, what you would expect Nick Ward to give you. But the only question tomorrow with Ward, how many minutes and what happens on ball screen defense?
That's the question. So, first of all, before we talk about, I guess, the downside to his defense, he gives them a completely different dimension on offense. Tillman is a lot of things. He's not super comfortable as a post scorer. They're not going to give him post touches. He's not quite as aggressive running in transition.
As a rim runner?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
So Nick Ward gives you that threat for a few possessions a game. And
he gets you easy buckets.
He'll get you, and that can change a game if you get 4 or 5 easy buckets, right?
Especially if it's a 65-64 game or something like that.
Because the last couple meetings, it was really kind of a grinded out thing where Cassius Winston was creating every bucket easier. There are just sirens constantly in this podcast. It's quite a thing.
Well, this is what happens when you have a St. Patrick's Day podcast on Championship Sunday.
But defensively, I don't know what they do with Ward.
Right.
Watching him today against the Wisconsin team that's not particularly quick, he did not look particularly quick laterally, and
he didn't.
Got called for a lot of fouls. He's probably not up to a complete game shape. I don't know that you can switch those screens when he is on the court, and I don't know what you really do defensively.
Yeah, I would be really curious just to know that if their option is you don't play much, are there ramifications? Because I feel like that's just the most obvious.
You can't not play him.
They're going to play him, but I think it's just too, the vulnerabilities on offense. If it's exposed early that's a thing, you can't ride it. You can't do it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he's getting buckets on one end and doing okay, and it's a wash, and then you ride it, and that's totally fine.
To be honest, that's kind of what happened in games between these two teams last year. Xavier Tillman played a lot of second half and crunch time minutes, that I remember, right? Because Ward was struggling. I don't remember,
but that sounds right.
And Ward he got into I think he had a technical in the game in New York.
Right.
A few incidents like that.
Right.
So he kind of negated himself for some of those games, and Tillman actually ended up playing, I would say, a lot of minutes, at least more than he was playing at the time, because he could do some of these things defensively and at least be a little better equipped.
All right, so we hit on Winston and Simpson, and we hit on Ward. Because if we just sit here and talk about this thing, this podcast is going to go for 3 hours. But, underlying keys, the things that you're going to watch for in this game.
I don't know that there's anything really... we've talked about this game, feels like so much over the last month.
The third time in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's just been this thing, and both teams are pretty... you know what you're getting.
Right.
You don't get to be this. You're not a top 10 team all year when you're trying to do different shit every week, right? We know what both of these teams want to do. It's going to come down to can they execute and who can figure out the right ball screen reads and adjustments, right? That's what every Michigan game comes down to, and Michigan State's the only team that has really tore apart Michigan's ball screen defense. If you're John Beilein, do you have something up your sleeve to switch everything?
I agree. Michigan's defense is the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they got tore apart in a way that no one else has torn them apart.
Twice.
Because everyone thought, yes, Michigan had a long scoring drought in the second half of that game, but Michigan State scored on, it was a bunch of possessions in a row. I don't remember the number.
Yeah.
Today, Michigan had a scoring drought in the first half against Minnesota, right? And instead, it was a 13-7 game turned to a 13-12 game over 8 possessions. That's what usually happens to Michigan when they go 8 or 9 possessions without scoring. Michigan State scored on every single possession, and then that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
The defense has always been what this Michigan team can hold its hat on and kind of get through a tough situation.
I mean, Michigan had 14 turnovers total in those 2 losses. Like, it's not like they're giving away possessions or anything. Like, they were just getting scored on and had no answer when things went sideways.
And what I always look at as sort of the barometer of how well an offense or defense played is 2-point shooting percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Michigan State made over 60% of its twos in both games. Michigan made 43% of its twos at the Breslin and 50% in Ann Arbor. You can't win if the other team's making 60% of their twos. That means it's dunk, layup, dunk, layup.
And it's without Ward.
Yeah. But I mean, Tillman was great in both those games.
No, he was the Ken Palm MVP thing in the second game.
He had, I think, 5 blocks and 2 steals in that game too.
Right.
I mean, Tillman's versatility.
All right, let's talk about that. The Simpson part of him being neutralized was that anytime he did find daylight, crevices, whatever, that he snuck through, and he would have those runners and little hooks and all that.
His layup.
Tillman was just swatting
his little
everything.
Sneaky. He likes to do those sneaky layups where he kind of gets by you and kind of throws it up like that.
Right, he puts his ass into you and gets a little bit of space and just flips it.
And he's really good at that against most people. But I think Michigan State did a really good job scouting it.
How many of those do you think he forced?
Enough,
Right?
Some
like
of
a lot
them
of those,
sure.
a lot of those in another game, I think, are those little
dump offs,
hockey passes,
hockey assists, or dump off to Teskey on like a delayed roll. That's part of it, but he's also been really effective with those shots in every other game against Michigan State. So I think that was a little tough, where you might not have thought Tillman could defend those shots, because that's a key point. Is Tillman's rim? He was, I don't want to say shockingly, but surprisingly good defensively in that game, and he's really emerged as someone that can do a lot of these things defensively that Michigan State couldn't do last year against Michigan.
Yeah, I'm trying to... Good.
Everyone switches against Michigan, and it was this whole thing, and they love to say, oh, well, Matt Painter never switched in his entire life, and then he switched against Michigan last year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you switch everything if you're Michigan? Do you try something like that to stop Cassius Winston? Because the second game in East Lansing, they played the same ball screen defense they played in the first game. They executed it maybe a little better at times, but it wasn't a dramatic change.
Switch everything? I don't know if I would switch everything. And it depends on the lineup, too. You know, like what lineup you're going up against.
Do you try something radical, I guess?
No.
Do you think Michigan's going to this game with the exact same defense, not exact same, but similar plan defensively to the last 2 games?
I'm not saying whether they should. I'm saying what I think they will do. Yes. I think tweaks here and there. Maybe like you said, Matthews on the 1-4 stuff when, you know, you can't. That's one of the things about Michigan State. You can't let Kenny Goins just bang you with 3 huge 3-pointers or something like that, because it seems like every single one of them are just haymakers.
Can we talk about how the hell this happened?
Can we pull up that stat from earlier today?
I had one in my preview too. He's like a 45% 3-point shooter since January 1st. Mm-hmm. And he was like 10 of 50 before then or something. It's something like that. His whole career.
Yeah.
And he's knocking down tougher and tougher shots, it seems like, every game.
Like now he hits him with a hand in his face.
Yeah, it was like only shoot when you're wide open.
Uh-huh.
And now he's hitting tough shots all over the place, and I don't know where Michigan State would be without him hitting those shots.
I don't think they would be in line for a 1 or 2 seed. And we'll get into some Selection Sunday stuff here before we get out the door. But, man, where's that stat I had? Sorry, folks, bear with me. I suck. All right, forget it.
Does he? It's something like 45% since New Year's.
Dane Fife once told me that like he didn't even really practice them that much, and then like in the recent summers he just come in and just gets up shots and gets up shots and gets up shots, and then you have, you know, once you once you have some trust built in to actually shoot them in games, they'll let you do so. But like
banging them, just fucking knocking them down. I mean, he hit one today that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
That completely changes the
He took
Michigan State
9.
offense.
He took 9 threes in the last game.
7.
Oh no, that was the Chrysler Center one. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
the last.
So he's
yeah.
taken 16 threes against Michigan.
Yeah.
That's crazy. And more than Cassius. Who's going to end up as like a top 5 all-time 3-point shooter at Michigan State.
It's just crazy to see Michigan stumped by stopping the sort of action that Michigan likes to stump teams with.
Mm-hmm.
And it all comes back, it all comes back to Winston. If Winston was an average point guard, you would just switch that 1-4 and say whatever. And because the thing about Goins is he's not he's not a threat to drive off the pick and pop. He's kind of like John Teske on the pick and pop, right?
Right.
If there's dribbles before a shot, it's not going in, whether it's driving or doing anything.
Totally.
But that's what Beilein said today after the game, and he finally had to answer some questions about Michigan State. And he was talking about what makes them so hard to guard is you have 40% 3-point shooters at multiple spots.
Yep.
And if you have McQuaid in a corner and going to pick and pop, what are you going to do? That's what every coach wants.
Right.
And that's why Michigan's been able to be an effective ball screen team with Xavier Simpson, even if he can't shoot, because they have Brazdeikis and they have Poole or whoever to spread the floor around him.
And what's interesting, too, is like these two have played 3. This will be the third time in 3 weeks, but even in that small window of time, they're both even a little bit different, right?
Oh, for sure.
Foster Lawyer, out of nowhere, you have to account for him, okay? He was not on the scouting report for the first 2, other than possibly capable 3-point shooter, but it's when Foster Lawyer comes in.
He scored something like 2 points in the other 17 games in the last month.
Look to exploit him, but
that will be. You're going to tell me Foster Lawyer is going to go bang a 3 over Xavier Simpson.
I'm just telling you, it's a different dynamic.
It's not.
It is something that they will have to account for and discuss where it wasn't anything. The same thing with Eli Brooks. Saying that it's interesting that with 3 games in this window of time, there are little tiny different elements still at play. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying Foster's going to go in and hit 4 threes again, or 5 threes, whatever he made in that other game.
To be fair, Tom Izzo said after the game at Ann Arbor that he wasn't going to even put him on the floor unless DeJulius came in. So I guess that is progress.
Right.
But I don't think at this point.
I'm not saying Michigan's game planning for Foster Lawyer. I'm saying you have to bring it up, you have to talk about it, you have to consider it. If Foster Lawyer comes in and hits 2 threes in this game, it's a complete game changer. Right? And given what we've seen this week, it's not implausible.
Sure. I would say Aaron Henry making shots of late is
that
a
was
bigger
the other
change.
one I was going to bring up.
That's a bigger difference.
He's made 2 in the last 2 games, something like that.
He's made a 3 in like 4 of the last 5 games, something like that.
I was going to bring that up, and then your
well,
overreaction.
That's a lot better point.
Your overreaction of Foster Lawyer derailed my otherwise.
If Foster Lawyer steps on
point.
the floor, Xavier Simpson's ears will be ready. He'll be ready to go.
Yeah, do you all listen to what I deal with on this podcast? Jesus Christ.
Aaron Henry, at least he's made 1 or he's 2 today, but a 3 in at least in 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah, I mean
that's a difference.
The whole you guard him with half a man. I don't know if it needs to be completely reconsidered. I still let him shoot and make him make 1 before I go and change anything. But if he makes 1, I don't know if you can go on that whole full cheat. Basically, if the ball's on one side of the floor right now, teams are playing his man in the middle of the paint.
What about Xavier Simpson? 5 of 6 threes this week. Michigan State's plan was to let him shoot. I mean, going way under everything, the switching. It's still sort of, is it fool's gold? Like, do you want him to shoot? Everyone can talk about how many shots he gets up after practice as long as you want, but
Right.
he still has not been able to crack a 3 next to his 3-point shooting percentage.
I mean, put it this way. I respect the hell out of Xavier Simpson, and I have learned not to question
All right,
Xavier
he is
Simpson.
32%. He does have the 3 by the shooting percentage. I'll give him that.
I think everyone has learned not to question Xavier Simpson. But still, if I'm drawing up an opposing defense and I'm looking at what are the options to be given up, I think I still want Xavier. If you're telling me Xavier's going to put up 9 threes, I think I'm going to take it.
I agree. Did you see, I think Mike Mulholland tweeted this, but did you see when he stared down the Minnesota bench after they told they can't
I
shoot?
heard about it afterward.
Yeah. I mean, that's like peak Xavier Simpson.
Yeah, anyone that talks shit to him deserves what's coming to them because it is a well-known fact that it will not end well for you. That's the other thing. Like, I mean, I know we already talked about Simpson and Winston, but I do wonder how ahead of it on his skis he got in those other ones, and because you're right, there was so much just uncharacteristic
He's shook
stuff.
And he's basically, his thing is to not be very shook.
Exactly. Anytime you ask him, like, "Oh, you feeling a little bit fired up?" No, like he could be. No, I keep the same. Look, I'm just telling you what he says publicly, like what he wants his public image aura to be. Is that, you know?
But you ask
don't
anyone else.
Don't even come to me with this. Of course, I don't feel any differently.
You ask anyone else,
Right,
they'll tell you something different.
Like, oh no, actually, he was literally with his fingernails ripping the paint off the walls of this room before the game.
He knows, and I think, but it's also at like a road venue. That place, I mean, Breslin was rocking. That's a different environment than a neutral floor game like this, which I think it will be a fun environment in there tomorrow. But it's more of a back and forth sort of a deal, right?
I'm getting corrected on Twitter. Man, these people. Well, I mean, Jesus Christ. We've talked about this game endlessly, like you said, for 3 weeks.
I guess here's the thing. What could be different? Like if you're Michigan. So here's something we can talk about. Michigan was really good for the first 25 minutes or so of both games. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Michigan State probably won about the 15-minute to the 5-minute mark of both games by about 30 points.
Mm-hmm.
Easy. If you're Michigan, how do you avoid that? If you're Michigan State, are you just confident that you can just take over the game in that point? Like, that's the juncture of the game that's really fascinating, right?
Well, so much of it starts with just bottling Winston in some way because as games go, he gets better and he gets more confident. Not confident. I feel like he just has a better read feel.
Understands.
Right, exactly. So it's a matter of just not letting him just run wild on you, basically. And then the other thing
It's also Michigan State's defense. I feel like they go through a spell in these games in that kind of part of the game where their defense just kind of suffocates whoever they're playing.
Right.
You see it against not just Michigan, but in most of their games down the stretch. And I don't really know if that's just a momentum thing or what, but it stands out as at least a trend with that team at this point to me.
Right. What could be different? Well, here's something that's worth talking about. Is both of these teams in this tournament have been starting games pretty well, if I remember correctly here. Michigan came ripping and tearing out in both games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Michigan State against Wisconsin came roaring out. There was a chance. I thought for a second there that they were going to put like a 35-point loss on Wisconsin's resume and then send them off to the committee, you know? Like the first 5 minutes of the game will be fascinating. I feel like it could be like classic, right? This back and forth, up and down, both teams just looking
Which
completely dialed in.
the first game was everyone scoring
Super
every
high
possession.
level. Super high level, right.
Just Luke Yaklich over there tearing his hair out because they can't get a stop. But it was super high scoring, people making shots, everyone going crazy. And then it was Michigan just stopped scoring. The second game, it was Michigan who was on fire out of the gate, and they played basically the same way offensively. Then everything fell apart for them on offense, and then Michigan State's offense was perfect.
And I don't even remember who the officials were for that game.
Lamont Simpson and some other guys in East Lansing.
Yes. Can't have it. Gotta let these two decide this game. Here's a question. So, it's a story I wrote on today on both these teams just being some key players who were just beat to hell and still just playing through it and all that good stuff. When they came into this tournament, both teams, it was like, you can get some rest, you can do this, you're both kind of locked in on 2 seeds, who really gives a shit, This game, while it feels enormous in the moment, it's in the bigger picture of the NCAA tournament, it's not that big. Like, the last game of the year, I said if guys are healthy and if the officials stay out of the way, the 5 starters will all play like 32 minutes.
They did not.
And they did not, right. Like, in this game, I don't know, like, do you play Xavier 38, 39 minutes? Do you play Cassius Winston 38 minutes? Like, how much run does Foster get? Like, you know what I mean? It's a huge game, but it's not burn the boats, right?
I think Michigan guys will play. They're full minutes. Michigan will take this like a game they want to win, without a doubt. Today they pulled the starters late, but that was because one of the assistants convinced Beeline they should. Like,
right.
He does not know how to do that and rest. I mean, he's going to try to win the game. It's what he does. Unless if someone gets up 20 or something like that, maybe it changes.
Yeah.
Cassius Winston's a little more interesting because he's notably banged up in his knees, his foot, whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Do you play him 40 minutes? I don't know. If you already won the Big Ten regular season, I don't know. I mean, I think there's an argument. Like, Michigan has more to play for in terms of motivation, and we lost twice, all that stuff.
No.
But Michigan State might have more to play for in terms of the NCAA tournament if they could be a 1 seed.
Yeah, I don't know how much
the 1 seeds don't matter and all this.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say I don't know how much players care about being 1 seed. I feel like Michigan State players, in terms of their motives in this game, is to beat them for a 3rd time and win both championships.
Well,
they don't care about a 1 seed.
Players don't decide if they're going to play 30
sure.
minutes or 40 minutes.
Sure.
Right? I mean,
fair.
in terms of how you're managing your workload.
Yeah.
I think getting to a 1 seed means something in terms of how likely you are to go to the Sweet 16 or the Final Four, right?
Totally. Let's talk some seeding before we get out of here. I still anticipate both to be a 2 seed in the tournament, but I think a 1 seed is in play for Michigan State. Now, I'm not saying if they win that they get a 1 seed. I'm saying that it is within the realm of possibility.
I think it's borderline crazy that there's not more talk about Michigan State getting a 1 seed.
Borderline crazy.
I mean, I think do they still lead the country in Q1 wins?
I don't know, but they're the top 2 seed without a doubt.
And you're just going to give 3 ACC teams. And here's the other thing. Do they make alternate brackets?
There will be at least 4 contingency brackets tomorrow, is what I'm told.
Scoops. I'm skeptical. Sometimes I'm skeptical of these contingency brackets. And if you
I think it's 100% a real thing, and I think there will be 4 contingency brackets tomorrow.
But you feel like a lot of times you watch the Big Ten championship and think it'll impact seeding more than it does, and then
I think it's all determined beforehand.
But
I think like the results are set on what happens if, but the actual game itself has no bearing.
Okay.
How a team plays is what I'm saying. Like if
you know, it's the result. If it's 1 point or 20, it doesn't
matter. If Michigan goes out there tomorrow and looks like
and wins by 25
and just looks amazing, right? I don't think that they are like
reconsider.
Oh Jesus, let's just make them the last 1 seed, right? I don't. That's not a thing.
Do you think there's 3 ACC 1 seeds?
I don't.
So you're going with the Vols or something like that as the last one?
No, I guess I don't. I guess I didn't really think of that.
It's
question.
Gonzaga, Duke,
North Carolina,
or Virginia.
Well, I don't know if there's going to be 3 ACC 1 seed. I wouldn't say no to it. I think that's certainly plausible.
Kentucky losing today makes it interesting,
Totally.
especially for Michigan State getting up to that 1 line if they win. I think
that was a big door swinging open, without a doubt. Sorry. So if you're a Michigan State fan and you want Michigan State on the 1 line,
who won the Duke game?
Tomorrow you're rooting for Auburn to beat Tennessee, right?
Yes.
Right.
Who won the Duke game? They're playing right now, right?
Duke is up 70-58 with 1:20 to go. I think Duke's a lock solid 1 seed.
Yeah, now that they won. If they would have lost that game, maybe it gets a little
to Florida State.
Yeah.
Gonzaga,
I think it's a joke they're 1 seed, but it seems
that's a different conversation.
They're going to be.
Logic still says that they will be. Michigan is, I think, without a doubt at this point, basically a 2 seed. Where they go is the conversation. The latest from Lenardi had them. Did he not put the regions? Come on, man. This email's useless.
He has them. He moved them to the east with Virginia.
To the east with Virginia.
Because he moved Kentucky down to the west, which must make me think that Kentucky is a lower 2 seed, right? Something like that.
So I would say Duke's probably playing for the number 1 overall seed tomorrow, right?
And if Duke wins, would they go to south or east? DC, right?
I don't know.
So it's hard to know because it's like Virginia or Duke probably in the east and the south.
Right.
What could get funky is what if Michigan State gets the 1 seed in the west or something? Well, I guess Gonzaga would still get that.
Think Michigan State and Tennessee are playing to bump Gonzaga.
So you're cool with North Carolina as a 1 seed?
With 2 wins over Duke, I think they might end up being a 1 seed.
So let me get this straight. Duke can lose to North Carolina twice, and it doesn't count because they don't have Zion.
Right.
But North Carolina can beat Duke twice without Zion, and it counts for everything just because?
Yep.
That doesn't seem a little ass backwards?
I mean, you know what we're talking about here. Ass backwards could be the motto of certain selection committee decisions.
So inconsistent.
Well, that's the way it is. And the thing is, when you watch Duke at full strength, it is clearly the best team in the country.
I get that, but why are we saying North Carolina gets credit for beating Duke when it was not at full strength?
I don't disagree.
I know, they won the ACC, they're good. I'm not saying that they should not be. It's just it's my problem with the process. Here's my question for you. You've watched every Big Ten team here in Chicago this week.
Oh, man. Does anyone else
win an NCAA tournament game other than Michigan or Michigan State?
Right now, I would say no one else makes it out of the first weekend.
Everyone.
This thing has derailed.
Everyone has left this place with just
They all look terrible.
I don't think anyone is happy with how they look except Michigan or Michigan State.
All look
and I get
terrible.
everyone has to lose in this tournament, but man, people have not really done it in a good fashion.
You can look good and lose a game. Everyone looks terrible.
Yeah, the average teams lost to worse teams, and then the teams that advanced just got crunched by the two Michigan teams.
Just awful. Like, just basketball-wise, it has been a brutal tournament here. Right?
Well, there were a lot of close games. It's kind of fitting for the Big Ten this year. A lot of close games between teams that no one actually thinks are any good, and we pretend like they're exciting, but they're really just close.
There's just been so many games where it's not who's going to win, it's who's going to lose.
Maybe you're the only crazy person to sit there and watch every single game at the United Center this week. You've been here since Tuesday.
Go read that Mo Wagner story, by the way, everyone. I appreciate it. No, and the irony, I said this to someone today, is I feel like nobody else makes it out of the first weekend, but if you put Penn State in it, they might actually win a game or two. Just saying. I'm just saying.
Get out of here with that.
Just saying. So, the Big Ten, I will say 8 bids, right?
Sounds right.
Ohio State gets in.
Yeah.
So, Michigan State, Michigan, Purdue, Wisconsin, Maryland, Iowa, Minnesota, Ohio State.
And we're going with... So, last week you were not taking Michigan to the second weekend. Has this week changed your view?
I'm taking Michigan to the second weekend. Yes.
They won 2 games by about 50 points,
They
and you're
look-
finally back on board.
I just think they look great.
No,
I don't
don't disagree.
I love the folks that are like, oh, why would you ever question tournament Michigan? Like, all right, get the hell out of here. Like,
It is worth...
they did not look good for a minute.
For a good minute.
For much of league play.
January, February, and
Yeah.
they lost themselves the Big Ten championship.
Totally.
They laid an egg in a couple games, and you just can't do that. But
And
we
it's-
also asked if they could flip the switch, and this week kind of makes me think that maybe they can. I don't know. It's also, it might just be that Richard Pitino and Fran McCaffrey don't coach in March.
Yeah, I mean, they played just trash-tastic teams, but, like, and...
But you can beat a trash-tastic, it's a nice word,
Thank you.
team by 12. You don't have to, I mean,
Right.
they left no doubt.
They can still certainly go 4 for 23 from 3 on any given night
That's
and
the
lose
other
a
thing.
game.
This is what Michigan looks like when they make 10 threes in a game.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's not a coincidence.
But I do think there's a confidence to them that you didn't necessarily see for a while. Do you agree or no? Or do you not buy into that?
I don't buy into that. I think that they've always carried themselves pretty much the same way. I think they're making threes, and Matthews makes a ton of difference. And maybe everyone's just a little bit more kind of locked in, really, on just what you're doing, right? That makes a huge difference. And it's hard to do for 32
I thought one
games.
thing that Luke said today in the locker room was interesting, talking about how they've been in these situations, and it's sort of empowering seeing that and going through that and knowing what it takes kind of to win in a tournament setting, right?
Luke Golson said this?
Yaklich.
Oh, okay. I was kidding.
Like, hearing that, and they've played a shit ton of postseason games over the last 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is sort of a contagious mindset. You know what I mean? That Minnesota has not played a shit ton of postseason games. They don't know what they're coming into when they show up 12 hours after the game last night, right?
Yeah.
It's just kind of what Michigan does, and they have an attitude about them in these kind of neutral court games. I don't know.
Yeah, and a lot of it is Xavier being like totally zeroed in on exactly what he has to do because everything starts there. The same way with Michigan State. You know, you talk to Cassius Winston, he's told me a number of times, like, I watch myself on tape sometimes, and I'm like, man, I'm just not locked in, and I'm not engaged in this time. Like, it's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously both are going to be locked the hell in tomorrow. Like, this could be one hell
Do you think it's
of a basketball game. I think it lives...
a great game?
I think it lives right up to everything. I think it's going to be a great... I said this to you. This is not just me bullshit hyperbole for the pod. I said this on the shuttle over here. I think this goes right down to the wire. And I think... I think that... I was gonna really go just way overboard and be like a hero's made tomorrow or something like that, but like I think somebody does something that's gonna be really memorable tomorrow.
I hope it's a good game. I don't know if I've watched a good game at the United Center this week.
No, yeah.
We haven't, and even both. I mean, obviously the Michigan State games didn't disappoint for Michigan State fans, but they weren't good games by any
No.
They weren't they weren't back and forth really and down the stretch, which I think would be nice to see.
Yeah, like I just want it to be 2 minutes left in the game.
And there's an element of the fact that it's sort of not an exhibition, but it's not like it is what it is, and everyone knows there's bigger things on the horizon.
Totally.
Maybe that makes it more of that kind of game.
That would be ideal. Well, when do we record again? Because we got to get to dinner.
We do have to get to dinner. You're going to get me banned from Open Table again.
That's right.
We will record probably early this week.
Maybe like Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Monday or Tuesday?
Sounds good.
So we will do tournament previews for both teams. We'll give some bracket thoughts.
Sometime between when we get home and when we get on a plane wherever we're going.
Right. Which is probably Des Moines or Columbus, because you know what? Needs to be done is go to more cold, gray Big Ten states.
Yeah.
This is me complaining.
Probably both be better than Wichita, Kansas.
I'd like to go somewhere warm, but
Need to cover some 6 seeds.
What are you going to do? Okay, so folks, subscribe to umhoops.com, subscribe to theathletic.com, leave a review, rate the podcast, share the podcast,
Subscribe
to the podcast, and they'll do it. We're in and out, right? Anything else you got to say?
That's it.
Tip your bartenders and servers, folks. Happy St. Patrick's Day.